Good morning and welcome to Spy News. Ryan Morton here with you. Every Thursday morning, Ryan and Barb talk about some of the biggest issues. Last week, though, we talked about an investigation that WSBY has been doing into the Sandwich Police Benevolent Fund, myself and the station owner, Larry Nelson. And we wanted to give an opportunity this week for people to talk to us about it. There were a lot of comments on Facebook about this topic, and we know we've heard a lot of calls coming in, too, off the air about this subject, and we wanted to make sure, because that's what Spy News is all about, opening up to the listeners. We wanted to give those people an opportunity, and also someone who's been very vocal about this, Larry.
And that's right. And one of the things that we reached out to was to the former police chief, Rick Olson. His name was first brought into the conversation in a city council meeting. We did not bring it in to begin with. Alderman Robinson brought it in, and that it was to the effect that he was the police chief. Why don't you ask him? So we have invited Rick to come on the air today. He had accepted. We asked him actually to come into the studio, and he couldn't make that, so he told us to call. And we have now called, I think, 2 times, and both times we have obviously the right phone number, but we're getting his voicemail.
So we'll see if we can get a hold of him during this show.
We've asked the producer to keep trying again, and we'll bring you up to date. But as of now, the calls are going to his voicemail.
Now, the way our system works, technically speaking, is we can't have a guest on the phone and take calls at the same time.
Right, we can't take 2 calls simultaneously. I think we're trying to work that out so that we can overcome that. And we, just so everybody knows, we did invite Rick to come into the studio, and that way he could take and answer calls that came in or anything else as people would call in, because we can only take 1 call at a time. So if he's on the phone, we can't have a second call coming in and have a 2-way conversation on the phone.
As I understand it,
we'll get there in technology eventually.
As I understand it, he's out of town, but then we will still, in the second half of the show, take calls from people if anyone's interested. We do have Rick on the line now, though.
Oh,
Rick,
good.
Thank you for joining us on Spy News.
Good morning, guys. Sorry for the technology issues. Just trying to get through to you, so sorry about that.
Well, I guess, Rick, I'm glad you were able to join us, because I want you to have your say and your comments. So I guess I'll just start out by saying the radio waves are yours and the platform is yours to go ahead and make your comments.
Well, the only thing I wanted to talk about, Larry, was the issue when it came in last week about it being a secret fund. And there's nothing secret about the Benevolent Fund. The organization itself was already started prior to me coming on board, and I believe Chief King even made the comment that it was in operation in 1971. So I didn't understand where the issue came up of it being secret. And the other thing too was that I know that the police department has some very dedicated, loyal people, and we're getting asked questions that maybe some other people should have been asked, and one of those people was I. I was more than willing to answer any questions somebody would have about it. As they say, there's nothing deceitful, there's nothing secret. And I guess the one thing that you rightfully said in your story was that there has been no indication of any money being taken by anyone, and that's absolutely the case. So I guess I'm here to answer questions that you may have directly regarding that fund, the stuff that I would know about. And it wasn't until after I'd sat and had a chance to peruse the whole situation and think about it was I realized that we'd actually made purchase orders to the city to reimburse the Benevolent Fund for some of the checks and payouts that we had done in the interest of the city. So that's where I'm at with it. It's pretty much, and from what I'm understanding, the Sikich auditing team is looking at it. I think that's great. They have an administrative letter they give after each audit, which tells the city different things that they need to change. And if there's something that needs to be changed with this account, something that the city has direct contact with, I would hope that they would do that. Last Monday night, Alderman Frazier very eloquently, spelled out all the issues the way I saw them, and answered many questions that people had regarding the fund. And hopefully now it's in the hands of the auditors, and once they complete their information, I'm sure there'll be recommendations of how to rectify the situation for the future. So that's pretty much my statement, sir.
Okay, well, let me just ask a couple of questions then.
Sure.
when we first started looking at this, our first FOIA was back in March of 2012. We finally, after a number of months, got some of the records of this fund. And just so you know, your name never appeared on any of the records that we had received at that point, the bank statements and everything else. So when you say, and as Alderman Robinson said, that we should have gone to you, there would be nothing indicating that you had much of anything to do with it, because your name was not signing the checks.
Right.
The resolution that opened the checking account in March of 2007 at the local bank did not have your name on it, and you were not a signatory to the account. So it would be, I felt that it would be a leap on our part to go to the person who was running for mayor and start in reverse accusing him of something when, in essence, as you know, Rick, when you do an investigation, if there's no smoking gun with that person's name, how do you get there?
Well, I guess, and you open a very good, comment there. I did investigations for a number of years. One of the things that I would do is talk to people that may have had anything to do with any of the situation at all. There were questions about computers being purchased and guns and so on and so forth. I guess I would have asked the people that may have been involved in that to clarify some of that information.
Well, yeah, I understand.
Again,
but Rick,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, that information about the guns and the computer was not revealed until 3 weeks ago. Mind you, we started this in March of 2012, and for almost a year, we got none of the detailed receipts. All we got was the copies of the checking account, which did not indicate that there were purchase orders from the city or that any of those other things were involved. The other stuff, actually, if you read the log that you supplied me yesterday, the city clerk on our 2012 March, she thought in April she had turned over all the records to us, and we came back and said, no, we think there's still some missing, and we kept going with that. And finally, after our news department filed 4 more requests in, I believe it was December-ish of last year, we found that then there were more records, and then we asked some more questions, and there were even more records. So the actual knowing, like you say, that some of the things were spent for guns and for computers and so forth, it was very hard to ascertain that prior to 3 weeks ago. We really didn't have knowledge of that. Let me just ask a bigger question.
Sure.
You were police chief, so now you're kind of standing up saying you were police chief during all this time.
Yes, I was.
Who was in charge of this benevolent fund that was technically, if you want to call it a technicality, it was in the city's name, city's federal ID number, not charging sales tax and so forth, but never recorded on the city books, and never, the auditors in their first report said there was 100 and some thousand that went through it in about 3 years, and there was never any report of all that money to the city. But anyhow, who was in charge of this fund? Who did the
benevolent fund people that took care of it? The people that were on the.
Could you name the benevolent fund?
Well, I could, but I'm not going to name names. I mean, that's part of the issue.
Well, but if you were chief, you must have known who was in charge.
Well, I did. I mean, obviously, I knew who was, but that issue's already been resolved. I mean, as far as who the person was, I don't think that this is the forum to talk about that.
No, but are you then saying that the person signing the checks was in charge? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay, the person who signed the checks for the was the one that was being presented with bills. The bills came from several different areas. As they say, if you looked at the purchase orders, you saw some of the bills were required for us to get something immediately. We would ask that a check be issued and that we would get a reimbursement back from the city, which is exactly what happened.
The reimbursements back out of $107,000 or $105,000. The reimbursements from the city were in the magnitude of less than $10,000. So there was still $90,000 plus that there was no reimbursement from the city and was
Correct.
offline.
There was no tax dollars involved with this at all.
Yes, there was. There was money from the Sandwich School District. That was tax money.
Well, it wasn't tax. It was not coming out of the coffers of the city of Sandwich as well.
Well, but it was tax money, and there was also money from the Emergency Telephone Board.
That was another reimbursement that was made for a purchase after a lightning strike.
Well, there were three different purchases.
Okay.
Three
Well,
different
as I
was
say,
it- were
there's
there
times
three
that we
different-
had to purchase something, and then we were actually reimbursed for that fund.
Rick provided us yesterday with some documents of benevolent fund purchase orders that were made by the city to the benevolent fund, showing that some of the expenses that we had mentioned last week, things like the ad for a police officer, computers, firearm training, the rifle shipments, that those had been paid back by the city into the benevolent fund.
Ryan, and if I could add one thing, and part of this investigation was going through the city. There were questions being posed to the city clerk, to the administration of the city, and what's unfortunate for you gentlemen is that you were not provided with the information that was being kept at City Hall. Those being the purchase orders.
But
The only
again, that
thing
was
the only thing that I had were copies because they have my signature on them. The City Hall has the original copies of all the purchase orders. When this was being discussed, somebody should have stood up and said, "Well, you know what? They even have a VIN number for the for the Police Benevolent Fund." And that was my issue because when I heard the word secret and it was used over and over and over again, there could be nothing further from the truth that this fund was secret. Also, Sikich had done an audit every single year, and at no time did Sikich ever come up and say, "Hey, what about this fund?"